creatures are alive. They're not books. They are the very living essences of nature itself.
Unbelievably powerful supercomputer that's running our reality, and we don't have a clue as to how to operate it.
Say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world.
For the seeker. Broadcasting from an undisclosed location somewhere in the deep and mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. Live from Forest Tower Studios, brought to you by the Fringe FM and KTOK Digital Broadcasting. This is Lighting the Void. And now, your host, Joe Rupe.
All the way from the Forest Tower Studios in the lovely natural state of Arkansas, I'm Joe Rupe, and this is Lighting the Void. Voices for Verity in this crazy realm of polarity. Good evening. It is Wednesday, June the 6th, and the night is still pretty perfect and mild here, and the moon is in its last quarter during its wane. So fire up your chakras, sync both hemispheres of your brain together, and shoot your magical beam of light through your third eye tonight with us as we peer into the void. We are live on lightingthevoid.com, KTOK Digital Broadcasting, the Fringe FM. Don't forget, I have to keep reminding you guys, if you don't have an internet connection, that call to listen line always works for TalkStream Live, which is 701-719-3971. Save it in your phone. Tonight, the one and only Amelía Aeon Karris is back on the show again. Perfect for this Wednesday. We're going to be talking about sex and our primal nature. Yeah, that'll get your attention, right? So this is going to be an interesting show. Don't forget, Saturday we'll be at Spaced Out Saturday. I'll be speaking with Marla Freeze. And if you missed last night's show with Jason Louv, we talked about John D. and Enochian Magic. Great show. You can check out all the archives for free. It's been a fun week. We're going to continue doing this thing. Thanks for hanging out with me. The chat rooms. If you want to get involved in the chat rooms, there's one on Spreaker. There's also a Discord chat room, the Fringe FM chat. You can get there from the Lighting the Void website or the Fringe FM. Just click the chat links and it'll take you straight through there. Now, the cool thing about that is you can do that on your phone. You can do it anywhere. It doesn't really matter. And I want to tell you guys that we're kind of on red alert. I know you hear that a lot. So if you can donate, that'd be great. If you can't, just share the show. And thank you all that have helped this show and this network so much. I really, really appreciate it. There's enough people to thank that I really don't have time to thank everybody, but I promise I will get all your names out. Today was a pretty good day. Spent the time petting the cat now that Leo's home. Did some yard work, went for a swim, ate some blueberries, and now we're going to do a show with Amelía Aeon Karris. So this is going to be fun. If you're not familiar with Amelía Aeon Karris, she's been on the show a few times here. Her website is knowtheself.com. Her book is out, which we can talk about that too. But, yeah, it's always a great conversation. Everyone loves the conversations that we have on here because we go pretty deep. And speaking of which, I think when you see this word, like that word sex, it grabs everybody's attention. But we're going to get into the fundamental nature of it and the esoteric meanings behind it all. And it's going to be one of those types of conversations that I think we all need to hear. And that's the cool thing about Amelía, too. She's not afraid to talk about anything. And everyone that's ever taken her mystery schools or used any of her services brags about her to no end. And I am very happy that she's here with us again. Now, I want to tell you guys about the Void Walkers room real quick. All you got to do is go to lightingthevoid.com, put your name and email in. By Friday, I'll have the new episode out for you guys, for the subscribers. It doesn't cost anything. There's actually a Void Walkers chat room in the Fringe FM chat room. It's not a trap, but it's a chat room. And I like the Discord chat, man, because you can post links, you can do all kinds of stuff. We have a lot of fun in there, and it stays up 24/7. You can download the app on your phone, tablet, PC. You can even use it from your browser. So that's why we put that up there. It's really fun. Now we're going to welcome back Amelía Aeon Karris. I try to get her on the show at least once a month. But before I welcome her in, I also want to tell you who we're going to have on next week, just real quick. Tuesday night, we're going to have Jerry Cthulhu from Nox Mente, and his co-host is going to be with us. We're going to talk about dreams and consciousness and all the cool stuff he talks about on his show. And then Wednesday night, we're going to welcome back the one and only Daniel Joseph. We haven't got to speak to Daniel Joseph in a very long time, so the student of the great mystic Daskalos, Dr. Stylianos Ateshlis, the Researchers of Truth man, Daniel Joseph, will be back with us, and he's going to take your phone calls or any questions you have for him as well. But tonight, it's all Amelía. And Amelía Aeon Karris is going to give us her monthly update. Now, the paperback of her book is out if you haven't heard about it. Her school is filling up fast. Her school always fills up really fast, but just in case you don't know about her, I'm just going to tell you a few things. Obviously, I've said this before. She's a wayseer. That's true, a trendsetter throughout her career spanning technology. She's worked in several fields before she got into this, including fashion, technology, and entertainment. But in 1994, she co-founded one of the world's biggest web design companies before the public had even heard of email. But that was her old life. But her entrepreneurial ventures led her to Japan and India, where she spent a decade working with those nations' elite businesses and spiritual leaders. She has seeded eco-communities in the USA and India, instilling her expertise in permaculture and community governance, and continues her consulting with intentional communities today. She's got a BA in consciousness, healing, and ecology, and has apprenticed in a number of mystery schools. Her powerful healing abilities and clear vision were forged during a series of spiritual initiations over a 9-year period that honed her multi-sensory awareness and unique voice. All of everything is in the show notes if you want them. There's so much about her. You can check the website at knowtheself.com. Amelía, this subject matter we're going to talk about tonight is an attention grabber, but why did you choose to talk about this tonight? Thanks for joining us again, by the way.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Well, sex is something that lives in the shadow. And as you know, I love to talk about shadow work and all of the, cleaning out the closet, so to speak. And sex governs our lives. I mean, we were created from sex. Our sexual power and our second chakra is where the seed of all of our power and potential lies. And so we need to address our sexuality. And because society and religion has shamed it, and all of us carry around some kind of scars or shame or guilt from our sexuality, it just lives and grows in the shadow and creates kind of a nasty pain body that keeps us in either victim consciousness or just hiding from our true potential. So if we really want to step onto the path of self-mastery, we have to master our sexual energy. And for anyone who's had a Kundalini awakening, they know that, their sexual energy rises, and it's such a primal force. And I think that it really confuses people. And the more I work with people and listen to people's challenges, and also just dealing with my own challenges in my life, sex can be really confusing when you're on a path of liberation and awakening. It brings up a lot of ethics and values and morals that really need to be addressed. And there's not a lot of places or people that are willing to go into that material. So I just felt it was important to bring up, and I'm just hoping that, people are ready to talk about it. I don't think a lot of people are going to particularly like what I have to say. It might challenge some of the listeners, but
good.
It's important.
That's a good thing. We like to challenge the narrative around here. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So why don't you think people are going to particularly like the message?
Well, I just think our sexuality is challenging, right? So we have this primal nature in us that is very animalistic, and we've been taught to be domesticated or tamed into submission. And a lot of that has been through our childhood traumas. So I think that people don't like to go into their childhood traumas or any sexual trauma. They want to kind of close it off because it's really painful and ugly. And a lot of people want to just, I don't know, put on rose-colored glasses, or it just makes people uncomfortable to talk about whether it was incest or child molestation. But I think it's the majority of people have had a sexual trauma as a baby, before the age of 6. And the more I work on people, the more I see it as the norm rather than the rare occurrence. And that saddens me a lot. It really brings a lot of despair to me because I see how many people have sexual trauma. Like, that's more common than people who've been raised with a healthy sexuality. And I think that's where the trigger lies, is that, when I say that to other groups, people get very upset. I've heard people say, oh, I was never abused, or that never happened to me. But then when I work on them and really get into their system, as a seer, I can see the energetic fields around a person's body. And our sexual chakra, which is really close to our body, it's one of the first areas that gets manipulated and distorted and perverted. So maybe someone was saved by sexual abuse and didn't have any sexual abuse in their family, like they had a really pure and wholesome family full of love. If that's true, then that's fantastic. Like, that's what we want. That's what we need. But it's the rare occurrence and the rare person who gets to experience that kind of wholesomeness. And so if they didn't get it in their childhood, they're probably getting it as an adult through the sex industry and pornography and the desensitization and the over-sexualization of all of us. It's just, we get it pretty much at every corner. It's pretty hard to avoid.
Well, I think that after reading several books about the mystery schools and stuff, at the top of all this, it's kind of what you find. And some of it's kind of twisted as far as, I don't know, some people's tantric teachings are a little different than others, but it's like, okay, so I'm digging and digging and digging, trying to find the source of the mysteries and the Kundalini experience and the awakening and everything. And at the very deep end of this is sex. And you're like, well, okay, so maybe we don't understand it, right? Maybe the Adam and Eve story isn't about a snake and an apple, and it kind of gets you thinking about all that. And if you really think about cause and effect, there's, all of our, I guess, discomfort with sex causes a lot of our pain and suffering, if you really think about it.
Exactly.
I mean, why do we care about making so much money? It's not really to be rich and do everything that we want, especially from a man's point of view. I mean, you can talk to any man and they'll tell you, oh, I want to have fast cars and I want to do this, but why are you really wanting to make all that money? What's wrong with you? And I think love has been taken out of it a little bit too, don't you?
Well, yeah, that's the huge problem. And I think it goes back to the darker agenda of, control over the population, because love is the most powerful force on the universe. And so sex without love is sort of where we've been guided to. I mean, if we look back at relationships over the centuries, there's been a huge shift in evolution. There was the tribal cultures and times and places and people where, men and women were equal and the woman's pleasure was just as important as the man's, but it wasn't really about pleasure. It was more for procreation and support, and men had multiple wives and that was not a problem. But then it turned into some, when religion came in, there was ownership and stealing of wives, and then the whole marriage doctrine. But if we move forward, like just in the last 100 years, like from our grandparents to our parents to us, there's been another massive shift. Like in the 60s, with the whole free love movement, I really think that was a constructed experiment to give the psychedelics to awaken people to their primal nature, but also control it in a way with some distorted vision. So there was a liberation in that, and a freedom from the patriarchal rule of marriage and the woman being the housewife, and then women, the feminist movement and women going back to work and wanting equal pay and wanting the freedom to express their sexuality and sort of demanding their own pleasure, which was quite a shift from the 50s.
You. That's what it feels like. The world is saying, "How dare you demand your own pleasure?" I mean,
yeah.
Look what. I mean, I'm not trying to bash the Muslim faith, because there's some beautiful teachings in the Muslim faith, but I don't know where they got that from. Covering up women's beauty and not letting them do anything and keeping them stuffed in a cave where no one can see them or talk to them or any. It's just crazy.
Well, yeah. And I think part of that, from living in the East myself and amongst Muslims, I had no problem covering up. I dressed like a Muslim for many years because the men were so crazed. Like they couldn't control their primal nature around a female's beauty because they weren't trained in the arts. And I think that's something we lost in our ancient cultures. I mean, ancient Vedic culture, like in ancient India, where the Kama Sutras were created, and in the East, there was beautiful expressions of teaching the art of love. That we've lost the different types of love, everything, especially in America, like we've really dumbed down our sexuality to basically lust, greed, power, and control, and power trips, right? It's like, it's been so desensitized by porn and this need to possess and jealousy and all of that. And we've lost the finer art of intimacy and all the different types of love. Like the ancient Greeks, they say there's 7 different types of love, right? So eros is just one, that body, that lust, the sexual desire. But we've lost the ability to, I call it knowing right relation, right? So because of our kind of disturbed upbringing and all the sexual abuse that's gone on, we've broken down the trust between relations. So, no longer do daughters trust their fathers or their uncles or their brothers because they've misused them or mistreated them and didn't keep them safe. And no longer do we trust those in authority from, spiritual authority or even teachers, because so many people have misused their power, right? They've taken their attraction, and I think they've been controlled to do this. So that's another sort of angle to this. But I think that the men have been controlled to just see lust. So when they see an attraction or when they see something beautiful, their attraction sensor has been hardwired to just get an erection and want to, jump on that. I don't want to cut your station, but
you hear that in circles too, though, Amelía. Like you can get in a circle of dudes at any point in time, and you'll always have this one guy that's trying to explain a woman's beauty. Like, yeah, she's sensitive and she's smart and she's beautiful. And then they go into talking about all of the beautiful things about a woman, right? And then the rest of the guys will be like, oh, yeah, well, she's got a nice whatever, too. And then they just try to bring it back to that.
To the base level.
To the base level. While there's that one guy in the crowd trying to explain the real beauty he sees in a woman, And I always find that funny because it happens every time, Locker room talk.
Right. And I think that men have been programmed to be like, I mean, we've lost the ancient teachings of love and relation. So when I say right relation, for me, because I suffered sexual abuse and different, I've had rape of many different, situations that have traumatized me around sex. Yet I love sex and I love my primal nature and I want to express myself. And I've spent many years focusing on the healing of my sexuality and really addressing these deep-rooted issues. And one of the things that struck me initially, which was how I sort of defined men or people in my life, is understanding the relation that I have to them. So if it's a teacher or a new male friend, I had to decide really quickly, like on instinct, I had to put those people in a certain category, like brother, uncle, father figure. And for me, that was helpful. And I would often tell the man, look, you're my brother. I understand there's an attraction here, but I think it's a mental attraction, like we have this creative spark. So when you find friendship with the opposite sex, or for those of you who are attracted to the same sex, it doesn't really matter, but where you're going with the attraction. Like, we've lost the ability to see the finer sensuality and the intimacy and the levels of intimacy that we can have with someone without making it about sex. For example, I remember in my early 20s, I had a business partner who was a very kind of incredible Japanese businessman. And I remember telling my mother, and she said something like, "Oh, well, are you sleeping with him?" And the amount of times I heard that was so disturbing to me, that someone would think that I was sleeping with this man and that's why he was my business partner. It was so disturbing, because there was nothing at all like that in my relationship to him. He was a mentor, he was a friend, and we were so stimulated by each other's business expertise that we worked really, really well together. But it was an odd connection, right? Like, there's not many like 28-year-old women who are working with, 55-year-old businessmen. It was kind of strange. But I thought, why are people so simple-minded, and where have we lost the ability to categorize and have wholesome friendships? And I see that it's from the amount of distortions and trauma that everyone has endured.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't look really back on my life and see that's happened, like you say, but I've never really done any real deep workings like that. But I can say that I was brought up to be ashamed of certain things. When a kid grows up, they have reactions to some of the stuff they're seeing in the world, and they're taught to, well, that's bad, and, be ashamed of it. And then they wonder why everybody's so confused in their adolescence,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, shame is where it all hides. That's the door all of it piles up under, whether it was, through puberty and masturbating, or finding porn, or being caught in some act, or whatever it might be. Everyone has some sexual shame that they need to clear in order to find their liberation of their mastery over their sexuality. Otherwise, there's this kind of hidden space that nobody can go in. And when we have these hidden areas that can't be, we can't be vulnerable in, or we can't expose, or we can't clear, then we can't access the real purpose of our life, or what we're here to do, because it's the same doorway, it's the same gateway.
So that's where I'm a little bit confused. And if you can go into that a little bit more, like, how does our sexual energy relate? How do we use that to find our purpose in life? Yeah.
So if we look at, the the second chakra, the sacral chakra, where our, reproductive organs are. It's the source of our creation. And that energy center in our body also houses, all of our creation, all of our potential, all of our kind of wisdom of the innate wisdom of creation. So when we have blocks and distortions and kinks in that area, whether it was through trauma or shame or just maybe a bad breakup, right? And we just shut down that area, then we can't actually live into our spiritual purpose here until we open that up and start to clear it. So does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, because, I can think back of all the times when I've repressed that, whether it's been breakups or whatever, and I definitely wasn't my whole self. I kind of was obsessed with the pain I was feeling, or maybe the shame, instead of doing what I was needing to be doing,
Yeah, and for a woman who's had trauma, sexual trauma, like our womb is connected to our throat and our voice. It's like the same muscle. And so when we shut down our second chakra or our levels of creation, or we have shame, we also lose our voice. And we lose our ability to ask for what we need or have boundaries. And so then the perpetration continues.
What I want to get into is, why did all of even in the Western mystery schools, I don't know about Eastern, but I know in the Western mystery schools, especially like even Renaissance magic and stuff, that was the highest secret. The two sexual energies to come together to form any type of creation and your spiritual purpose and the Kundalini awakening. It's like you had to go through all of this stuff just to get to that point. And I don't know, is that healthy to work your way gradually into that? Does it shock people too much if you just come out with it, kind of like we're doing now, or why do you think it why do you think it was that way? Why do you think they even structured that way in the mystery schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do think that it was structured that way because you can't really handle facing those fears that lie there until you've really created a solid base and a solid practice. So it is a higher level of adepthood who can master the sexual energy. But I think that we're in a crisis right now. So, and with all of the teachings already being exposed, people don't need to go through proper levels of initiation. They're getting them haphazardly. And yes, it's dangerous, but it's also important time of liberation. Like I don't know how much we can control the process. I think that with our ability to just evolve and just where the conversation around sex is going, like if we look at the LGBTQ community, like they've already plowed through a lot of this just from opening the discussion. So the discussion is happening, and I don't think those who can't handle this will be listening tonight, and I'm not going to activate any energy. It's more of a discussion and a pondering, because I think we really need to focus on the healing of our sexuality. So a lot of people in marriages or long-term relationships, they stay in them because they're afraid. They're afraid of their sexuality. They're afraid of expressing their sexuality any further. Like they've gotten to a place of comfort and then they just shut down. And that might be safe and fine in the right path for many of people. But for those listening who have gone through a lot of relationships, whose sex is kind of an important part of their life and their expression, and they want to heal and they want to ascend and really do the path of the spiritual warrior and master their energy, and they're here to really be of service to the world. For those people, you need to clean and clear the second chakra. Otherwise, there's too much misuse of power. Like when someone activates the second chakra, they step into a leadership role. So if you look at our leaders, it's really obvious why so many leaders have misused their sexuality. I mean, it's obvious on a spiritual level, because their kundalini is rising. They have access to a lot of personal power, but they need to feed the power, and there's distortions in the field that makes them reach to kind of feed off of others, or to keep that virility and that energy alive. They kind of vamp their energy off of young people or prostitutes or whatever, wherever they're going for their sort of, sex food, rather than filling themselves up energetically.
I see what you mean. And giving that energy out to the world properly. Yeah.
So it's a skewed our entire system. Like all of our really powerful people in the world, from the Pope to, big gurus. I can't count how many really powerful people I've met who are in seats of power. And I've seen firsthand that they misuse their sexuality. And I think right now, it's coming to a head with all of the, pedophile rings being exposed. I mean, that's been going on for a very long time. It's not at all surprising to me. It's been obvious to me since I was a child, watching how people were feeding off of young children and sexual energy. Like it's not clean, it's not pure, it's not wholesome, it's completely perverse. And I think for us to really get back to our purity and find the wholeness within ourselves, we need to find that sexual spiritual bliss within ourselves first, to really develop what I would call a evolved relationship with another person.
Yeah, well,
and I think it's quite rare.
I was going to ask you about that, because once you start talking about this stuff, a person that is in fear about this is going to say, and I mean, it's kind of whirls in my head a little bit too, is going to say, well, is Amelía, is she talking about, what's she talking about? Having sex with whoever she wants, orgies, and just liberation like the 60s and not caring and yada, yada, yada. I mean, or is she talking about, that's what people are afraid of, you see? And even me, like I've never had an open relationship and couldn't have an open relationship with anyone. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to think that that's ownership, because I'm not the jealous type. I'm pretty good at letting things go. So I get a little confused about that too, because history tells us that there were men with many wives, but there weren't a lot of women with many husbands,
Yeah, some tribes had that, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm not promoting any one way of relating. What I'm promoting is the return of love and for self-healing and sexual mastery. So I think it's really important that everybody does their own work and finds their own boundaries and finds their own voice around their sexuality. So if you have, for those of you listening who've had sexual trauma, finding ways to acknowledge it and express it, because what happened to us in relation to another, like if we were sexually abused or raped or whatever perversions were perpetrated on us or that we participated in willingly, we can only heal them in relationship. Like we can't heal necessarily by ourselves. And that requires a great risk of vulnerability and finding our way through the pain to return to our innocence. So for my own process of returning to my innocence, like I spent 5 years celibate, even though I was married. my husband happened to be a practitioner, a master of Tantra. So he knew how to cycle his energy. So he was very happy to hold that healing space for me and for me to repattern the miswiring of my body. So it was a really beautiful and healing and necessary time for me to clear the trauma in my second chakra. And I didn't know that I was abused as a child. It sort of came out through my awakening, through a lot of memory that started flooding back in, and it was extremely disturbing for me. And it really skewed my sexuality and confused me. And it was like kind of a torture to have these images replaying again and again and being unable to like get them out of my head. So I had to go through a process of finding, like retracing and recapitulating all those experiences so that I could get back to my wholesome self, to the place in me that was untouched, that hadn't been taken away. And when I, in all of my 20s and into my 30s, I never felt innocent. Like, I don't remember as a child feeling innocent. I felt like my innocence was taken at such a young age. And I remember, meeting others who had an innocence about them and feeling sort of jealous. Like, how can they be so carefree? How can they feel so pure? Like when I met my ex-husband, he's from India, and he had a purity about him that I had never seen in an American man or a European man.
So it was more than a confidence. It was more than that, right?
Oh, it's not.
Something
Yeah,
different.
not about confidence. It's a level of connection to love, and the ability to have love so present in the body that when you come back to your own wholeness, and you seal off those wounds or heal those wounds or fill up those gaping holes that have been taken from you or projected onto you. When you seal those off, you come into a level of presence of peace and kind of a serenity and a wholesomeness and a knowledge of the self and a safety inside the self that doesn't exist in someone who, whose field is full of trauma, shame, and other kinds of distortions.
Well, isn't that where a lot of people's insecurities come from too? I mean, if you think about it, I know insecurity has to do with confidence, but there's other insecurities that are even deeper rooted, I think, that come from that as well. Or am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right. I think a lot of insecurity comes from, this societal projection of whether, from a female side, it's like, you're only worthy if you're in a relationship or have children or are having a certain level of sex or sexual expression or look a certain way, right? There's all these projections onto our sexuality that if we don't have them or feel fulfilled in them, then we have this lack of confidence, or we have this shame building up, or we have this area that we don't want to touch or talk about. And if you look at, just families and sex education, who grew up with, a really open conversation around sex? Not many people. Some people have, some people who were raised by conscious parents have a very open discussion around their sexuality. They didn't have the shame or the guilt, but most of us grew up with some sort of, religion or shame or some sort of control and discomfort around speaking about sex.
So back to the esoteric thing, right? Let's see. Again, with the secrecy of the, I spoke to Lon Mao Duquette one time, and he said that it was the biggest and highest teaching to understand that the masculine and feminine energies is the biggest form of power in this universe, in creation and mystery. And he even stated to me that the world and life itself, and he had some kind of epiphany, I think, that we were living inside some big orgasm, I guess, like life itself is inside this. And the problem is, though, is what I see is like a lot of people are using these things like teachings that Crowley taught and stuff like that. And I'm not just pointing at Crowley, because I really think Crowley did love some of the women that he dated. But I just don't, I think if you take love out of it, then you lose the power, even the esoteric power. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or I could be wrong, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it is a primal thing.
Well, I think in those higher levels of initiation, you learn the discernment between these different, 7 levels of love. Like, you understand your different levels of attraction and repulsion, and you learn the difference between sex and love and intimacy. Here in the West, we've sort of merged it all together. We don't know deep intimacy without our sexuality. Like, most people don't experience intimacy unless they're having sex.
What about the people that cling? Like, most dudes that I knew growing up, and when they had their first sexual experience with a girl, they would just cling to them. I mean, sit beside them in lunch, not just, I'm talking about follow them around like a dog, and you would see the girl would just get totally, I mean, at first they kind of like it, and then after that, they were just totally disgusted with it. And it happens almost to like every dude in the world, because it's like they grew up with all the shame that was taught about it. And so it's this great big mystery to them. And then when they finally do have sex with a woman, then they just lock on to them, because it's the highest form of love they've ever had in their life, and they just can't let it go. And I think that's the drama that, and I want to say from a man's point of view, and maybe girls go through this too, but from a man's point of view, a lot of guys have been through that, and it's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the same for females. I think that, once we connect our sex to each other, a man and a woman, we're opening up to our spiritual nature. It opens the gates up. And so, our sexuality and the orgasm is the spiritual connection. Like, you see the symbol of the catechist, that's used in medicine, of the 2 snakes intertwining up the rod, and then they get to the top, their tongues touch, and the wings open up. And that's a balancing of the feminine and masculine. But these are 2 independent polarities that need to match. And so when they don't match, we get into the push-pull dynamic and this whole what I call horizontal living. So there's the codependency and the attachment and the clinging and the vampiric sort of misuse of energy, where you're feeding off the other. So instead of getting your food directly from source, like from the vertical axis point, from the central sun and from the center of the earth, you're then trying to feed off of those people around you. And that creates massive energy distortions. It's very manipulative. And yet we were trained to do that because we weren't trained in the proper way of holding our center and nourishing our center first. So we all have the masculine and the feminine qualities within us. And a lot of, it doesn't matter what your sex is, we have these masculine and feminine energies, and they're not in balance. Some of us develop our masculine qualities because, maybe our father was absent. If it's a female, like maybe the father was absent from the home and there wasn't a man to really hold that pull. So we overly focus on the masculine qualities. So the masculine qualities are like direction, focus, knowing your deepest life purpose, grounding, integrity. It wants to bring things to an end. It's very conclusive. And the feminine energy is more chaotic. So it wants to be filled up. It wants to express. There's so much emotions and flow and dancing. And so these two polarities in our body need to be nourished simultaneously. So in the ancient teachings of Tantra and those higher levels that you're talking about, the goal is to balance both poles and to let them cross over and purify the channel symbiotically. So if one of your poles is stronger than the other, it's going to distort your flow. It's going to create some chaos and disturbances. And that's part of the danger of teaching people who don't have a strong foundation, because, energy starts rising. And if only the feminine channel's open and their masculine doesn't have the grounding and the direction, then they can create a lot of chaos. If they can be emotional wrecks, they can create distortions in the field around them and the people around them, and their relationships can be very, you see a lot with Latin lovers. I think they get a bad rap for being really dramatic. Yeah. The jealousy, those kind of psychosis, that love sickness that happens is when the feminine channel is stronger than the masculine.
Well, how much of the world do you think is in this state right now? I mean, honestly, if you look at the divorce rate, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I think we're at an epidemic level of sexual distortion. That's why I want to talk about it. Because I think if we focused on mastering our own sexual energy and understanding bliss inside our own body and nourishing our own center first, then we're going to have very healthy, loving, expressive relations with another. But if someone hasn't done their inner work or doesn't know how to tune into themselves, that continual push-pull, clinging, codependency, or shame and blame game gets perpetrated and continues.
Yeah, you're taught this in the Western schools too, and even Kabbalah. That like force, the male is force, just pure force, and then female is form, and then they've got all kinds of other different correspondences to go with it. And then you kind of start noticing these things, not just in nature, but in society. And you can also see that when I talk about polarity on the show, I'm not just talking about good and evil. I'm talking about the circuit of energy, and how it's the fundamental of how it should work and on the right level as far as action and reaction goes to everything that happens to us in our life, or all the stuff we take in. But also in that as well, sexuality, energy, electricity, good and evil, it's all there. But I really think that the male and female, it all goes down to that. I don't know if that's the highest form of energy, though, but I think it is. I really do, as far as the universe goes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's in everything in nature. You know what I mean?
It is. It's the source of creation.
So this is why I'm still kind of confused as to, like when you go to a mystery school, they say, okay, in Western mystery schools, maybe they do this in Eastern mystery schools too, but they say, okay, start doing these rituals, meditations, and visualization exercises. And you have no idea that at the end of this road, you're going to learn about these energies. And I'm wondering, like, why don't you guys, it would make more sense to me if you would just come out and talk about this first, so I could see where I'm going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I think that, we have, patience is hard, and sort of going step by step, I think is tricky. But I do think that we all are in need of balancing these energies immediately. Like, it doesn't matter if you're in a mystery school or not.
Right.
Everybody, has sexuality inside them. I mean, there's the rare person who's totally asexual. But, for those of you listening, I just encourage you to do some journal exercises and some deep reflection with yourself on getting to know your own desires. So we all have things that attract us and repulse us, and parts of ourselves that we've shamed or blamed or shut down. And so to just identify, where we're blocked. We all have blocks. Like, even though I've been doing this for the last, 15 years, I've been actively clearing my second chakra. I don't know if it's ever going to be 100% clear and activated. I know that every level and every ring of mastery that I clear, I gain back my wholeness and my inner peace and an ability to create at a different level, to be of more service to the world. So I just feel that it's to our advantage to do this work wherever you're at, even if it's just taking the next step. So if it's someone who's gone through a ton of trauma, like maybe it's just finding a therapist to work with and just start to address and identify what trauma you've been through. If it's someone who's just had, shame, or they're in a relationship funk, to just identify it, to not shut it down. I think that because of our digital culture and the way that we've been segregated, first it was the nuclear family, and then the nuclear family blew up, and, in all the divorce rates and the whole independence movement. So now it's a bunch of independent people living alone in homes, with their TV and their computer as their friends, right? Or whoever lives inside the TV or the computer.
Everybody's hermits now, yeah.
Yeah, and that makes us very susceptible to all kinds of levels of control. And I think that what's needed is for us to come back together, to heal together.
Well, what about marriage? Like, I think marriage is a good thing, declaring that I'm going to do my best to love this person for the rest of my life because I want to have this partner for the rest of my life. Most people in my shoes that are out dating right now say, I'll never get married again. I don't know about that. I mean, I think marriage is a beautiful thing, but then again, when you get done with the ceremony and all this stuff, it seems like it's such a contractual thing. You're signing papers and you're becoming this legal union, and they even make you say words that don't sound like you're really saying. I mean, why should someone stand there and tell you to repeat the words? Why don't you get to say how you feel during a wedding ceremony? Repeat these contractual binding words. I'm thinking.
Yeah, they're spells. And I think that marriage is very beautiful, but I think we have to look back at the history of marriage and why it was there, and redefine it for ourselves. So if you are someone who wants to get married, like being really clear about why you want to be married and what marriage means to you, and making sure that the person that you're marrying has that same understanding and the same value system around marriage, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. Like in the East, marriage is a very different thing than in the West. In India, most people I knew were in arranged marriages. Love marriages were very rare. Some arranged marriages allowed for the spouse to have lovers and flings and flirtation. There was a lot of room for that. Other arranged marriages, they didn't even know each other when they got married. It was the families arranging their union, and then over time they fell madly in love with each other because it was a good match and they trusted their parents. Like, I've seen all kinds of situations around marriage, and it was really fascinating to live in the East, where marriage is just so different from my generation in the West. Maybe not different from my parents' generation, but definitely different from my version of what I thought marriage was about. So
I felt more married to my ex-wife when we weren't married, like as far as on an intimate binding level. than afterwards.
Yeah,
after the ceremony, after the signing of the papers and stuff. I mean, I love ceremony. I'm all about it, but I like to have power and control over what I'm doing. I don't like the state to tell me how to do it, or a religion basically to tell me how to do it, because right now, as far as the results go, you can see it's not working very well. But Neil Donald Walsh wrote a book called Conversations with God, and they kind of reenacted their ceremony in that book the way they did it. And it's totally different than how we do it in modern society, and it was awesome. I mean, it was really cool. I bet you if people did it that way, I can't recite it, but I bet you if people did it that way, more marriages would last.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've had the beautiful privilege of designing a couple of weddings for friends of mine. And we did that. I took them through exercises of really getting clear, because I wanted to make sure that they knew why they were getting married. Some people just never ask themselves why they're getting married or what it actually means. And then designing the vows to really be meaningful, not just repeating very strong words that someone else wrote in a time period that was very different from modern day life. So I think it's important to just get clear about what you're wanting and really tap into the deep desire of the heart, because things are changing. We have all kinds of options these days. This is not the same reality as, 20 or 30 years ago. It's changing. And I think with our conscious evolution of our spirit, our spiritual evolution, also comes the evolution of relationship and our sexuality. And I think it's just one of those taboo topics that when we get into it, sort of opens a can of worms, because people have very polarized views and issues about, like if you talk to the conservatives about, gay marriage, they just get repulsed and disgusted, and they can't even talk about, they can't even breathe.
They're afraid of everything, though. They're scared of everything.
So I think that really mastering your sexual energy means that you have to annihilate all these fears. You have to break through these places and really identify, what are you scared of? Where are you afraid? So I'm not advocating for polyamory, but I think when we're talking of, a lot of people are so freaked out about their partner being with someone else, or being attracted to someone else, or having any kind of intimacy with someone else. And for those people, I think they really need to get a little closer to what it feels like to face those fears. Like, what are they actually afraid of?
They're afraid of losing the love that you have. That's what they're afraid of. Fear comes from I think is all about love. Love is love, and then fear is a lack of it, or a fear of losing it,
Yes, and I think actually the fear is that they would be out of control if they gave themselves that permission to do that.
Right.
I think most people that are really jealous and really controlling are the ones that are the most provocative, or the most afraid of their own sexual energy.
Pretty controversial statement there, but you know what? It's been said by many of people before. We're going to take a break. We're going to talk about this, the 7 types of love. I want to get into that too, and then how this affects our modern day life as well. You guys don't go anywhere. Good stuff. We'll be right back with Amelía Aeon Karris.
randennett.weebly.com, and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
This is Reverend John M. Polk from johnpolkmedia.com, and you can listen to my show, The Quantum Hologram Matrix, every Thursday night. ETs, UFOs, metaphysics, the paranormal, and more are some of the many topics we will cover on The Quantum Hologram Matrix. Make sure you bring your higher concentric multidimensional selves. That's every Thursday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, right here on The Fringe FM.
If you have hard water, the lime scale not only leaves white spots, it clogs pipes and breaks down appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars in energy and wear. Eliminate lime scale and other water issues like brown staining and bad odors with HydroCare water products available from Wave Home Solutions. Wave's affordable water systems don't use salts or chemicals. You'll love the way your water tastes, smells, and looks. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Hi, this is Ryan Gable, host of the Secret Teachings radio show. If you are interested in ancient knowledge and hidden mysteries, as well as a unique and balanced perspective on conspiracies, symbols, and the occult, then join me every Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new paranormal radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Oh, you know what I like about me? This is Rich Giordano, host of the Paranormal Code. No, I'm serious. The show's on twice a week now, Sunday and Thursday, on thefringe.fm and Spreaker, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. Yeah, it's 2 hours. It's live. And I do a show like you've never heard before. So you're going to come here, you're going to get your information, you're going to be entertained. But you're also going to hear the truth like, you won't forget. Like you've never heard before. And for those of you who've been following, thank you. Thank you for talking me into this extra night. Now I'm on twice. Great. Hey, good for you, right? The Paranormal Code. This means something.
Do you find yourself bored and longing to learn more about the mysteries and conspiracies behind our reality? Specifically, every Friday night from 7 to 9 Pacific? What a coincidence, because that's exactly when me, Gigi, and my lovely co-host Cortana kicked over the airwaves with just the right amount of intellectual stimulation to give you that eargasm of conversational excellence that you deserve. So be sure to check out our show, Shift Habits, every Friday night from 7 to 9 Pacific, that's 9 to 11 Central. And let's shake some talk radio tail feather, shall we? Right here on KTLK, The Fringe FM.
At The Fringe FM, we value your opinion and we want to hear from you. Love a program? Got a future guest or show idea? Let us know. Email us at talkback@thefringe.fm or leave us your thought by calling 501-777-5631 or message our Facebook page at The Fringe FM.
KTLK Digital Broadcasting, thefringe.fm, Napa Valley, California, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Rupe. We are live on lightingthevoid.com and thefringe.fm. If you're just joining us, thank you very much. We are here with Amelía Aeon Karris, and we are talking about sexuality, our divine nature, our primal nature, and it's been an interesting conversation. Not one that many radio shows like to touch, but we're here about the truth. So we're going to go down every rabbit hole to get there. Amelía also has a free video series, Master the Art of Change, which is her rebirth and renewal process at knowtheself.com. And this will help you annihilate your fears, navigate spiritual awakenings, and the dark night of the soul, and how to become an agent of change. Also, she has a Mount Shasta retreat, the Rebirth and Renewal Conscious Camping Quest, July the 26th through the 30th, and there's only 6 seats left. And you can do the 2 payment option for 1 more week if you jump in there now, and that's at knowtheself.com/2018-retreat. That's all there on the website. Amelía, thank you again so much for joining us on Lighting the Void. It's good to have you here. We got to do this, keep doing this at least once a month. These are always like really good shows.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks for having me.
I like it because you're not afraid to touch any subject, and I really think, as far as spiritual warriors go, you're definitely one of them. And, before the break, I wanted to talk about the 7 types of love, but I don't want to skip over anything that you feel is really important. So where do you want to go from here before we left off?
Yeah, we can go back to the 7 types of love. I think that's a good place to start. And I'd love to, if somebody has a specific question, feel free to put it in the chat room, and maybe, Joe, you can let me know. I'm not looking at the chat while I'm talking, but I know this is a hot topic, and there's a lot here, and we're kind of jumping around. So hopefully we'll get through it. I do want to talk about some of the solutions and things you can do, but let's start with the 7 types of love, because, the ancient Greeks had these 7 definitions that, in English, we're just saying love, and love equals all kinds of things. We use the same word love for all the different nuances of love. But when we break it down, it's eros, which we all know, that's love of the body. That's the sexual desire. Then there's philia, which is the love of the mind. So that's where we get the platonic love and the brotherly love. And if we connect this back to what I was mentioning earlier about finding right relation with others in your life. So, so much of us have trauma from our family, wounding from our family, and wounding from our community members. And it's hard to trust people, right? Because for me, I'll talk for myself, I have a really hard time trusting people until I know that they can hold the right relation with me.
Do you trust me?
I do.
Great. I'm glad I earned that.
But you're also not physically in my presence, so it's easier.
I hear you.
No,
well, if you trust my voice, how about that?
I do trust you because I feel that we have sort of a brother-sister friendship.
Yep.
And it's been very clear from the beginning, like you were never flirting with me or trying to sexualize me or date me.
I probably would if I was in your presence, though, just being honest with you.
But it's been nice because you're not in my presence, so that would be really strange to do.
Right, I get it.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
Because that the body's not involved, so it's sort of like, why would we go there? I don't know.
But I like to make things awkward. You know how I am.
Yeah, I think that's sort of torture for people. Yeah, I don't like that. Anyway, so when we go to...
for me. You said that too once, though. You said something like that. I won't quote what you said, but you said you like to make people feel awkward as well sometimes. Or that you do.
I think I do unconsciously. I don't like to make them awkward, but for me, it's important to define relations. Like, for example, I'll just tell a quick story. I was working on a retreat, and I had a co-facilitator who was a guy, and we were actually doing a workshop on this very topic, on the divine feminine, the divine masculine. And we had this great meeting of the minds. Like, he really embodied the divine masculine. He was a practicing yogi, and we had an amazing connection professionally. And, you know, we were around the same age. He's very good looking. We went out to dinner once, and I just leaned over to him. I said, look, I just need to say to you that I'm very clear that this attraction is completely platonic, and we're not a match energetically for anything more than this sort of mental love, this philia love.
You knew that right off the bat? Like, you knew that right off the bat? Okay.
Because I'm very clear about what I'm attracted to. Like, because I've been doing this work to understand right relations. So gotcha. I said it to him because I could feel him. You know, there was an arousal of minds. It's very rare for him or I to be met in this way. So that was very exciting for us. And he said, how do you know that? How are you so sure of that? Like, we're just meeting. Like, we haven't really, you know, gone on a date, or we haven't gotten a chance. And I said, no, I'm just very clear. Like, I see that our sexual energy is not fully a good match. Like, you need someone much more feminine, and I need someone much more in their masculine power. We're not matched.
Can guys do that? I mean, like, countless times when I've talked to you about, hey, let's do this show, or come on this show, or let's do this thing, and you just be like, let me think about it for a minute, and then you go off and kind of feel it, and then be like, nah, let's not do that. And I was like, God, I wish I could do that stuff. I wish I could feel my way through things like that.
Well, I think you can. It takes practice to develop that sense, but you just have to listen deeply. And so this goes to, like, training the body and mastering those channels inside yourself to know what's coming from your body, what's coming from your heart, what's coming from your mind, and what's coming from a projection. So with this guy, we'll just call him John. I don't want to say his name in case he's listening. But John was like, how do you know that we wouldn't be good together? And I was just like, no, I'm really clear. And, like, can we just put this on the table? And he was very uncomfortable with me saying it. And then, you know, so the dinner was a little bit awkward for a few moments. But then afterwards, and after we worked together, he came to me and he's like, I'm so grateful you said that. Like, that just took all the energy. I was losing so much energy wondering what our attraction was or where this was going to go. And I said, yeah, I could feel you doing that. And I was just really clear that it wasn't meant to go anywhere. Like, it wasn't going to be some long lasting love. Like, sure, he was really good looking and he was attractive. And there was a moment where I was like, oh yeah, maybe I could, you know, allow this to develop. But I just knew that we weren't the right match. And I didn't want to waste his energy or my energy or distract from our work. I really wanted to focus on the co-creation that was the attraction, right? This.
Gotcha. So you knew it was philia, love of the mind.
Yes.
Okay.
So then there's ludus love. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Ludus, but that's the playful love, the flirtation, and that's where people get confused and maybe jealous and think that it's eros. And I think this guys love playing. And women, but I found a lot of men are really good at that level. Like, they love to flirt and they don't need to possess anything. They just want to express their sexuality and sort of tease, but they don't have a need to, like, take it to the next level or get sexual or physical with it. And I think for a lot of women, or I can just say for myself, that's a harder boundary for me. Like, I can get confused with flirtation because I'm like, okay, are you teasing me? Are you wanting something? Is it safe? Am I going to get attacked if I allow the flirtation and then I don't give anything? You know, are they going to rape me? You know, because I've been date raped before from men misunderstanding my own flirtation. So for females, it can be very dangerous to be playful and flirtatious. It could come across that you're trying to get something or that you're easy, right? So, but that's that's a type of love that's very fun, and I think we've lost the innocence around that.
Do you think that's when because that's how I always start out, as real playful with girls, and I think it's like, do you think that's when the bad stuff comes out? Not like the insecurities, but the stuff they need to work on comes out because they're not. It just
or possession or fear. Like for me, if someone's playful with me and I don't totally trust where they're going with it, then I'm going to put up a lot of walls. Or if it's my boyfriend and he's doing it, I might, feel jealous or like, where are you going with her? Like, do you want to be with her? He's like, no, I'm just enjoying that woman's presence. So I think we've lost our innocence around that. And if we go back to like grade school and high school and, our younger years, that was a very natural state for most of us. That was where we hung out because we weren't sexualized. Like we hadn't been already, into our sexualization. We were still in that innocence of just getting to know people and enjoying lighthearted flirtation. But that's also at a time where a lot of, for me, a lot of trauma happened because I would be flirtatious and playful and then, be punished for it or be attacked.
Yeah, you would give in to it, and open yourself up to it, and then you'd end up being a victim somehow.
Yeah. It would mean that you want to have sex, or it would mean that you're supposed to then go further. Right. And so there was this like allowance to just let it be.
So there's Eros is love of the body, Philia is love of the mind, and Ludus is playful love. What's the next one?
Yeah. Pragma. So that's the long-standing love. That's the love that develops over time. That's the love that really keeps us fulfilled. When I see in India, like the arranged marriages, a lot of them have this deep pragma love. It's just this commitment and this unconditional, loyalty of standing by someone's side. And it really comes through time. It comes over time and being there for someone regardless of the up and downs. So if you look at someone who's been married, 30 something years and is happy, that's pragma love.
Okay. That's the one thing that I've never really, I've had not more than 5 years, I think, do you think arranged marriages is like a good thing? It can be, apparently, because you were telling me a story before how it kind of worked out.
Well, in arranged marriages, it's not just they marry you with anyone. They're looking at your astrological charts and matching them. And, you have to have like a 98, 99% match for family to marry them. So they've already done all the homework and sort of the mathematical equations about if your personalities are going to get along. And then the families, it's really cool. And then the families are having an arrangement with each other. Like it's basically two families deciding on behalf of the groom and the bride that this is a good family union. So there's already this harmony built in the best cases. They're not all like this, but in the best cases, that was, you see this beautiful extended family and these joint families because that work has been done and all those considerations of temperament and astrological signs and financial and that they're coming from the same stratosphere of society.
And we have Match.com. That's what we use.
Yes, exactly. And I think a lot of Match.com marriages and unions work really well because it's taking the confusion. So our eyes confuse us, right? Like we've been so programmed to be lustful creatures and to be attracted from visuals, through whatever porn or advertisement magazines, what we've been told is attractive or unattractive. So we lose out on all the other aspects and all the deeper levels of love that we actually need for our survival and for our security and our sense of safety and fulfillment.
Not to throw this, just a real quick statement I want to make. My astrologer that I use is is Jeff Harmon. He's my astrologer, and he uses a lot of Vedic astrology. And I got to say that it's pretty accurate in a lot of ways. So that really impresses me that they kind of do those things. I say, I didn't know they did that.
Oh yeah, it's very thorough. And there's certain, if they don't match like over whatever 89, 90%, the family will keep looking until they get a stronger match. That's generally the way it's done, so that they can ensure that the best life for their child, right? And it's a different kind of marriage than what we know here in the West.
All right, so that's pragma, which is long-standing love, which I guess develops over time and commitment. And then what's the next one?
Agape. Agape is love of the soul. So that's where we get the unconditional love and the selfless love that could be in service to humanity or to some larger gift, like when people just feel the love of the planet or the love of a particular group of people. It's that soul to soul love where there's no need for reciprocation. It's just love for the sake of your soul loving and giving love in service to humanity.
So that would be like maybe the Buddha or Christ story, possibly.
Yes, that would be agape love.
Okay.
Selfless love, servicing humanity with that love. Yeah.
All right. And then what's the next one?
Philotia, I think is how you say it. It sounds like something else. It
sounds like something else, but no.
I know. I was like, I don't want to say it out loud. Love of the self. So taking care of yourself first, like loving yourself. This is self-love. And this type of love has a big shadow side to it where the way we see it mostly in our society is narcissist or opportunistic, people that are trying to climb up the social ladder. So they're putting themselves first in this selfish kind of way. But the positive and the illuminous aspect of this type of love of the self is where you love yourself enough to take care of yourself, to understand your own needs, to stand up for yourself, and to give yourself the love and respect you need in order to actually survive and thrive.
Wow. Okay. And then there's one more. I think there's one more after that.
Yeah. The last one's called storge, and it's love of the child. So this is kind of the easiest type of love in the sense that it's a natural kind of love where you want to care for a child or someone that needs your support. So it's unconditional, and there's so much forgiveness and tolerance in that kind of motherly or parental love. So these are all different kinds of love, and I think because of the sickness that has been sort of placed on us and the distortions and all the triggers and traumas, these nuances of love or these definitions and different types of love have all been kind of blurred and mixed up and focused all in eros, in just our sexuality.
Can I ask you a question just for a couple of listeners that I know might be wondering about this?
Yeah.
What if you're in a situation to where, let's say you have a physical disability or something, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't get to live a normal society like everybody else, but you still have this energy and love, and you want to be able to do something with it, right? Well, is there any advice you could give them? I know that's a tough one.
So you're saying that someone is...
Say, for instance, if I was paralyzed or something, or if I had some type of disability, but I still had this... Everybody's got this energy in them, Of
course.
What?
So there's so many types of love. Yeah, so are you talking about the eros love?
Yeah, so do they need to... So they would just, focus on one aspect that they could actually do? Say, for instance, maybe agape or something like that?
All of them. I mean, they could do all of them, and maybe like, you know, if somebody's impotent or paralyzed or doesn't have, they're asexual and they're not aroused by their sexuality. I mean, Eros is sort of like just one aspect of love. It's not, we don't need Eros to be our main focus by any stretch of the imagination. We're overly focused on it.
There's still 6 other aspects of love you could deal with, you know.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that are more profound and enriching.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Like the Eros love is where we go crazy. That's where the love sickness has been so misconstrued. Like ancient cultures, they didn't marry for love. Anyone who was obsessed by love, they called them sick and disturbed because they were just so obsessed. It's like an obsession, and our whole culture has become completely obsessed. We're all love addicts, love and sex addicts. And I think that there's a malicious intent to make us like that, because if we're all focused on you know, getting laid and our next lustful encounter or having our next orgasm, we're missing the point of life altogether. We're missing the richness of life. We're missing the true refinement of our mastery.
Yeah, and how does that separate us from animals? I mean, if you think about it, like, I'm not saying animals aren't divine beings, but we're supposed to be living above that spiritually, I would think.
Yes, and I think animals also, they don't get so obsessed by it. Like, it doesn't run their entire life. They're procreating. Some animals find pleasure in their sexuality, like, you know, different monkeys and things like that. And it's a pleasurable experience, but it's not their main focus of their life is to have sex. But
right.
Western culture has been so hijacked. Our sexuality has been hijacked, and I think it's a plan to keep our astral energy tied to this plane, to not allow it to reach the higher spiritual aspects that we're capable of. Because when we reach beyond Eros and into the divine love and into agape love and love of the self, we access our divine knowledge, our innate wisdom. And when we do that, we heal ourselves and we activate our full potential. And that's going to change humanity at a fundamental level if we were operating from that place. But because we're so Eros obsessed, we're stuck with greed and jealousy and possession and the over-sexualization of individuals and children and women, and it's kept us trapped in this low-level, very dark spiral of shame and toxicity. And I think it's really important for each one of us to really evaluate our sexuality, because that's where it's all hiding. Because people don't want to talk about it, because they're ashamed of whatever happened to them in their childhood or in their past, or of their sexual deviations or perversions, that's where they're leaking so much of their own vital life force.
So could you give maybe an example, say, like, if I got filled with lust, or I guess you could say if I got too focused on agape or whatever, what could I do to, instead of, you know, and I'm sure many dudes will just pop on the internet and go to some website or make a phone call or however a dude deals with it, right? Because, I mean, we don't have to go down that road. But my thing is what is the right way as far as the esoteric and the spiritual way to transfer that energy into good? or the proper way?
I do want to go down that road. So I do want to talk about the fantasy and porn and projection. So, from my perspective, or from a right use of will and mastering your energy and being in right relation, when it comes to your sexuality, you would not be feeding off someone else's image to fulfill your own sexual lust. That's a misuse of your power. So it creates a negative feedback loop. And listen, everyone who's listening to this, myself included, has done it. We've been programmed to do that. So I'm not trying to shame you, put any guilt on anyone. This is just a product of what we've been dealt with. So what I'm proposing to you, or inviting you to try, instead of going to the McDonald's version of fulfilling your desire by looking at porn or magazines or this kind of sexual projection onto another human being, to find pleasure in yourself, to bring it back to the philautia, the love of the self, where you're learning how to find your own pleasure sensors in your body with yourself, and reaching a higher state of orgasm and connection to the one soul, to your monadic self. So when you reach a state of ecstasy, and it's so much beyond.
Can you do it through meditation, or is it like physical acts?
But yeah, even through masturbation or any sort of self-pleasuring, to just stay focused on yourself, to project your image of needing pleasure to be fulfilled by the object of your desire, whether that's the porn star you're looking at, or the nudie mag, or the girl next door, or whoever you're wanting to want or possess, right? So many people think that fantasy is harmless. And I want to say that it's not harmless at all. I think that there is a cost to fantasy, and I wish that more people understood energetics of getting consent. So if you're fantasizing about someone you've been with in the past, that's different, because there was consent and that's sort of a memory you're calling up. But if you're fantasizing about someone you haven't been with and you know that person, you're basically using sex magic on them.
Now,
so
does that affect them too?
Yeah, it does.
That's bad.
I personally can feel that when someone's doing it to me, and I don't appreciate it unless they've asked me if they can sexualize me like that.
That's
I really
bad.
don't
Yeah,
like it.
bad.
It feels like psychic rape to me. So I don't appreciate it. I know sometimes it can't be helped. Like, it happens like in a dream state, and someone will tell me, oh my God, I had a dream that I had sex with you. Okay, that's one thing. But if you're actively projecting your sexuality onto someone who has not consented to that, is not in a flirtatious dialogue and provoking you to do that, you are basically kind of raping their spirit. And if we all understood that and sort of just checked ourselves, like, where are we going with this? How can we come into proper alignment with our own sexuality and our own pleasure, and learn our own pleasure channels, like learn how to find orgasm in our own body without the need for someone else to give it to us.
And
so if you
in that Tantra, though, isn't that what they teach, kind of?
Yes, it is a practice of Tantra. I think Tantra, this Neo-Tantra, has been a bit distorted from the original teachings, but yes, it's the knowledge of self-pleasure. So when you know how to find your own pleasure senses, and you can experiment on your own body and find your own erotic zones and keep yourself in your own container without needing it to be reaching out and kind of feeding off someone else's energy, you enter the next level of sexual mastery.
That sounds intense. It sounds like it shifts you consciously too, I'm sure, like on another level, right?
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it gives you more containment, and it seals off your field from being courted to people. So if you're fantasizing a lot about someone else and you're allowing yourself to do that again and again and again, and this person hasn't given consent, you're sort of manipulating their field to like you in a certain way, to be attracted to you, or you're placing yourself in their field without them saying, yes, I'm consenting to this, and I would like to explore this with you. So I would like to see that become more prominent, like more. I would like to see the education of our sexuality and our spiritual nature become more prevalent, that it's not...
They're not so afraid to talk to young adults about it in school,
Yeah, like in school, we're just taught about, safe sex and masturbation, but it's basically taught to masturbate to someone you don't know or someone you do know that you want to sleep with. And that's creating a very negative, energetic, toxic attachment to that person. It's not harmless, is what I'm saying. It might be safe. You might be not giving yourself an STD by sleeping with everyone, but why not teach all the different levels of love and really look for someone who can match you in your own spiritual attainment? So if you're someone who has the ability to find your connection to spirit and to spiritual ecstasy, if you're with someone who doesn't know how to do that, they will just suck your energy because they want that spiritual ecstasy through your body. So they will just keep feeding off of you to give that to them, and the person who's being fed off of will constantly feel drained and depleted.
All of this makes sense to me. If I look back at every relationship I've ever been in, whether it was, platonic or whatever, everything that's ever went wrong is from focusing on, like you say, like agape, or just one aspect of this thing, instead of trying to look at everything from a balanced point of view and learning, not just, even like this stuff you're talking about could even teach us how to love others, not just ourselves too, but others properly,
Yeah, I think you meant to say focused on eros. Yeah, because agape is like the
I gotta go back to the notes here.
Well, let's just speak English because the Greek is confusing. But yeah, sexual desire rather than the unconditional love, the selfless love. Yes, you're right, and that is the problem of humanity, and we're kind of stuck in this in a trigger. Like, I think we're at an epidemic level where, a lot of young people, anyone sort of under the age of 40, I think, I'm just kind of making that up. This is not a real statistic, but it's just
probably is a real statistic.
This is my perception, but I think that a lot of men under the age of 40 are totally addicted to porn, and they don't know how to, all these different levels of love. They're finding it very difficult to identify and find deep meaning connection because they've been trained to be desensitized. A lot of people have, a lot of men have been circumcised, so there's a straight desensitization right there. And then they were raised on porn and prostitutes and strip bars so that they've over-sexualized women. So every woman they look at, they can't help but think about their sexuality. They don't know how to look at women in all these different ways, or to be in proper relation. Like, okay, yes, this is a beautiful woman, but can I interact with a beautiful woman without wanting to be inside her? You know, like, can I just interact with her and allow her beauty to be this beautiful creature, or do I need to possess it and make it mine, or own it? And I think men, sort of the world over, they're stuck in this loop. It takes a very evolved and wise man who has a sense of themselves and is healed inside themselves to be able to handle a woman's beauty and observe it without needing to
That's
own
peer
and
pressure too. You got to understand, from a masculine point of view, there's a lot of peer, like say for instance, locker room talk. Like I was telling you earlier, you could, if you got in a group of men and started talking about the beautiful aspects of a woman, and I'm not just talking about the physical body, there may be one dude in that crowd is like, yeah, man, I totally understand what you're saying. But the rest of them are heckling the guy, and that's pretty much, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, the sex industry is the largest, money grossing industry in the world. I mean, sex trafficking, porn, the clubs, in Japan, it's the Love Hotel. I couldn't believe in Japan there was a Love Hotel, even in countryside areas where, so far away from the city, there was still Love Hotels, and these are just hourly rooms that you can rent so that you have a place in secret to have sex. And I thought, oh, interesting. And the perversions, like in the East, especially in Japan, were just so commercialized. Like they sell high school girls used underwear in vending machines.
Oh my gosh.
And they sell what is it called? Anime cartoon.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's ridiculous.
Comic book porn in the liquor store, in the convenience store, but there's no parental guide. I mean, anyone could buy it. So you're standing in a train, smashed with people. They have people pushers pushing you in a train. And I can't tell you how many times I've been pushed into a train in Tokyo and, someone's groping your ass and you look down. And
you punch him in the face in Japan? Would you go to jail if you did that?
If what?
If you punched them in the teeth after they did that, like, is it just like you probably go to jail?
You can't move. I mean, you're pushed so hard that you're like on your tippy toes, and you can't even tell whose hand it is, right?
Oh.
But they have certain lady cars now because the groping is so out of control. But what I wanted to say is that, how many times I've been in a train in Tokyo and I look down and the guy that I'm standing over, like he's sitting down on the seat and I'm standing in the middle of the aisle, he's just blatantly looking at porn, like comic porn. And it's so normalized. And it's just this over objectification of the female body. And there's nothing wrong with sex or wanting to have sex. I'm not trying to, I hope people aren't misunderstanding me. Sex is a beautiful thing. It's fun. It's exciting. It's pleasurable. And we should all be having it. But I think we need to come into some sort of a balance and learn how to master our energy in relation to our own sexuality, how to heal those deep traumas and wounds and shame that comes with sexuality, finding ways to share it with someone that we can be vulnerable with, that we can be in connection with, and that it's mutual and consensual. And it's not just one person projecting their needs and desires and lustful fantasies onto someone else.
Do you really believe we could live in a world like that? That seems so far away.
I don't think it's that. I think that a lot of people are waking up to this. And I feel that, with the neo-tantra of the West, as much as I, have some judgments about it, because I think that it's sort of taken people into this like polyamory type kind of orgy style, which is not what it was designed. That's not the origin of Tantra. But I think that it's also opened people up to healing these wounds and moving beyond the confinement. So I think sometimes, the pendulum has to swing in the other direction. Like if it was really repressed, it needs to kind of fly way out there into, freeing the primal nature, which makes people feel out of control. And so they might act out of control in order to find the midpoint. So I do think that we're coming to a place that there's enough people who are awake enough and have done enough spiritual work to be able to hold this energy of wholesomeness, of right relation, of mastering the sexual energy and finding sexual ecstasy within themselves, and then doing that with a partner. We would be creating a different world. The children born of that kind of a union would be so awake and so clear. Most of the children that have been born haven't been through a pure state of love. There's a lot of wounding in the birth process, and I think that was purposeful. And I do feel that we're moving into a new era where conscious love, conscious partnering, new forms of relating, new forms of marriage and union through open communication and healthy dialogue, honesty.
How does this help us spiritually, though? When I say that, I mean, like, I know what you mean, like on a fundamental level, on a planetary level, on a consciousness level for the planet. And I tend to focus on I guess I'm a little bit too selfish, because I want to ascend so fast in consciousness to experience awakenings that I've never experienced before. This is like a necessary thing to master the self, and as far as moving into higher realms and stuff too, right? I mean, you see people having these Kundalini awakenings, and I've had friends that have ended up in psych hospitals and stuff because I just don't know if their body was ready for it,
Yeah, me too.
And
I think
this is part of it, right?
Yes, and I think that a lot of people who have their Kundalini open without having I don't think it's tameable, but tuned their sexual energy or healed it, you see a lot of them acting out and going crazy with their sexual energy. Like it's just insanity, and they end up, being medicated or locked up or just, they kind of check out and can't function so well. And that's why it's been in the mystery schools as initiatory processes. But at this point, we're moving so fast. And if we don't really just own our sexual energy and start working on it and speaking about it and finding ways to heal in relationship, in conversation, in exchange with someone else, we can only do so much on our own. But it's where we're vulnerable with someone else and we're witnessed in our wounding and we're witnessed in our healing. Does it really help us to evolve to the next level of growth?
So this is then I take back that statement. I think that the planet, I feel like we're going through birthing pains. A funny thing, that made me think about something when you were talking about the stuff that you went through when you were on the trains and everything. And I know I talk about the astral, the realms and Bob Monroe, but if you guys read, I think it was his first or second book, when he goes into this astral realm, he went to this place where people's bodies were intertwined. And he described it as like this terrible, grotesque sexual place where so many bodies were intertwined and just nasty place. And it represented us on this planet. And like, he saw that place in the astral realm. I can't quite explain it the way he did, but it was gross.
I didn't know about that. But when I had my big awakening in 2003, one of my big experiences was sitting in my apartment in San Francisco in the Lower Haight, very kind of seedy neighborhood at the time. And I could see everyone in their apartments. You know, I was in an apartment complex, so I could see what was happening in every room of the building. And there were a few different people having sex, and I could see their energy, and then I followed their energy up, and then I felt like I could see so many people in the city. You know, San Francisco is kind of has a dark sexual energy. A lot of people move to that city and get confused about their sexuality because anything goes and it's so free. But somehow I tapped into the sexual energy that was alive at the moment, and I was following it up into the astral realm, and I saw that there was a net over the entire earth that was trapping our sexual energy, twisting it on top of itself. And there was all these projections coming from a source kind of off planet above the astral realm down onto the astral realm, putting these projections of porn and lust and greed and jealousy and possession. And it was controlling the net so that it would stay contained. And I started to blast through it to break through to see what was on the other side of the net, like if we opened it up. And that's when I was able to access, you know, my full Kundalini energy and had the massive Kundalini experience that lasted for many days of feeling that, you know, I was in this orgasmic
It lasted for days?
Days.
That's
and
awesome.
It was, but it was like my nerves couldn't really handle it. It was so intense. But I realized that our sexuality has been capped and controlled, because if we are able to access above that net of projections and distortion, we're free. We're completely liberated. So it takes conscious awareness and personal practice to want to break those chains, you know? So I think, you know, for those listening who are saying like, well, how do I start? What do I do? You know, fasting from anything that's overindulgent in your life, whether that's sex or food or any habitual activity, if you have any kind of addiction, take a fast. Like really check yourself, because those addictions, whether it's to porn or to relationships, and everything in between, that's where we're getting lost. That's where the subconscious and negative programs get placed. And learn why you're doing that habit. Like, what are you avoiding by obsessing of, you know, porn or sex or food or whatever habit you have?
Why are you slamming 50 Mountain Dews a day? I used to have that problem.
Anything. Yeah, cigarettes, whatever it is. And then find ways to evolve and move beyond that limiting habit. If you can conquer your habits and change those hardwired addictions, you will be able to shift your and heal your sexuality and reclaim and seal off your energy. So that's kind of shadow, and, you know, sex and shame, you know, all sort of pile up back there. So thank you for letting me kind of open up the closet here with you all who are still listening, and airing some of this out.
Yeah, that's the beautiful part about owning the network. I answer to me, so we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. But it kind of broke up a little bit there at the end when you were talking. But, I mean, I think we pretty much understand what you're trying to say to us. At least I know I do, and I appreciate you. There's not a lot of guests that are going to come out, because I know there's many people that feel the same way you do, and higher learned people that want to express this, but it's hard to come out on a radio show and talk about it, you know?
Yeah, I want to invite anyone listening to join me. I have a private Facebook group for Rebirth and Renewal. So if you do go and get my 3-part video series, you'll be invited to join that group. And inside that group, I'm open to talking to you directly and helping you navigate whatever big change you're wanting to create. My whole rebirth and renewal process that I've designed over the years is to help people create positive change in their life. And I know that, you know, from my own overcoming bad habits through the years and really seeking to create a life of purpose, joy, and more abundance, I've developed certain practices that I share in that 3-part video series. So please go to my website, knowtheself.com, and download it. There's a little button at the very top of the page, and then you can join me in that Facebook group and talk to me directly with anything that's come up in this conversation.
You only have 6 seats left on your Mount Shasta thing? Is that all you have left now?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So every summer, last summer and this summer, I hosted Rebirth and Renewal in person on top of Mount Shasta. So this year it's July 26th to the 30th. It's during the Mayan Galactic New Year and a full moon lunar eclipse. So it's a really potent time, and Mount Shasta is an extremely powerful portal, vortex point. It's also the root chakra of the earth. And we gather out there for 5 days and 4 nights doing the rebirth and renewal process. There's some time for solo questing and meditation, but I also take everyone through some group processes. I share my Unwind Practice, which is a movement and embodiment healing modality. And it's an incredible reset. We take away all your electronics, so it's a big detox. There's amazing food, and it's more glamping than camping. You know, we can drive up to the spot, and so everybody has their cozy tent, but it's a perfect time to really reclaim and reset and repattern yourself.
You got to stop putting pictures up of those outside toilets. Those freak me out.
Those are the best. It is so liberating. Like, talk about activating your primal nature and setting it free. Like, being on the earth, sleeping on the earth, under the stars. It's so beautiful out there.
That's awesome.
And you're able to, restructure yourself. And the practices I share with you throughout each day really help you do that inner work to just reclaim what you want to claim in your life, to let go of things that aren't serving you, and to design structures in your life that really set you up for support and success. So if you get my video series, you'll be invited to join that. There's only, until next Friday, there's still the 2 payment option. And after that, it's just open until the seats are full, but there's 6 seats full. So it's filling up, and it's really a fun time. Go over to my Facebook page, and you will see some videos and pictures and kind of get all the info.
And if you don't, for some reason, if you can't, you could always join the free video series. But I would say this too, if you can't make the retreat, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't have Amelia's book, because I can tell you this, like, I've been studying mystery schools for a while, and in this book, she just kind of goes past everything and goes straight to the important stuff. And it's definitely a book you need. I would get the physical copy. Keep it handy. I take it everywhere I go, just in case.
Yeah. I haven't told you, Joe, that I launched the 3rd edition. It's available now on Amazon. It has more pages.
Cool.
It's been kind of revamped a bit. So yeah, you can get the new version if you go to Amazon, or just go to my website, knowtheself.com/synchronicity, and you'll get all the info there.
Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I can't wait to talk to you again. There's no telling what we'll talk about next time.
I know, who knows? But yeah, it's been a pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening. I really appreciate you being open to this conversation and wanting to dive in deeper. So I hope to hear from those of you listening over on my Facebook page. Thank you, Joe.
No problem. All right, that was Amelía Aeon Karris. We got to get out of here. This is Lighting the Void. I'm Joe Rupe. We'll see you next week. with Knox Mente and Daniel Joseph. Also, I'll be Saturday with Marla Freeze at Spaced Out Saturday. This show was produced by the Fringe FM and cannot be rebroadcasted or syndicated without written permission, and music was by Space Station, Cassiopeia, and Chronox. Good night.